Listen up, School Nation, because what I'm about to tell you will shake the foundations of everything you thought you knew about your Minnesota Vikings. Right now, at this very moment, US Bank Stadium isn't just buzzing with rumors, it's erupting like a powder keg that's been waiting 4 years to explode. The front office is in chaos, power has shifted, and one decision in the next 72 hours could either launch this franchise toward a Super Bowl or condemn it to another decade wandering in the wilderness of mediocrity. Let me hit you with the first number that should make every purple-blooded fan sit up and pay attention. $3 million. That's not pocket change for a hot dog and beer at the stadium. That's the cap hit for a former first-round quarterback who could be wearing purple and gold before the offseason dust settles. We're talking about Mac Jones, the same Mac Jones who just helped carry the San Francisco 49ers through a season while Brock Purdy nursed his injuries. The same Mac Jones who's only 27 years old and hungry to prove he's more than just New England's failed experiment. But here's where it gets absolutely wild. While the Vikings are secretly plotting this potential quarterback acquisition, a full-blown power struggle just reached its explosive conclusion inside the organization. Kevin O'Connell, your beloved head coach who turned Sam Darnold from a punchline into a Super Bowl contender, just won the war against general manager Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah. And ownership didn't just whisper about it in back rooms. They held a 17-minute press conference where they essentially admitted to 4 consecutive years of cumulative failures. Think about that for a second. 4 years. 4 seasons of draft mistakes, questionable free agency moves, and a quarterback room so mismanaged that both Sam Darnold and Daniel Jones walked out the door, leaving rookie J.J. McCarthy holding a bag he wasn't ready to carry. The Vikings didn't just make one bad call. They made a pattern of decisions that ownership reviewed, analyzed, and ultimately decided couldn't continue. Now, CBS Sports reporter Tyler Sullivan has dropped an absolute bombshell into this already volatile situation. He's naming the Minnesota Vikings and Pittsburgh Steelers as the 2 most likely destinations for Mac Jones if the 49ers decide to move him. The logic is brutally simple and devastatingly accurate. The Steelers are staring down the barrel of life after Aaron Rodgers potentially retires, leaving them with a quarterback room that inspires absolutely zero confidence. Meanwhile, Minnesota needs veteran insurance because, let's be honest, nobody knows if J.J. McCarthy is ready to be the guy, and if he goes down with an injury, the season could collapse faster than a house of cards in a hurricane. Here's what makes the Mac Jones scenario so tantalizing for Vikings fans. The dude is only 27 years old, which in quarterback years means he's got plenty of prime football left in him. His cap hit is just over $3 million, which in today's NFL is basically a rounding error. Compare that to the astronomical contracts being thrown at quarterbacks who haven't proven half of what Jones has already accomplished, and you start to see why this could be an absolute steal. That value proposition creates a perfect storm for teams looking to revitalize a career while simultaneously propelling their franchise toward legitimate playoff contention. Now imagine what happens when you put Mac Jones in the hands of Kevin O'Connell. This is the same offensive genius who took Sam Darnold, a quarterback the entire league had written off as irredeemable, and transformed him into a Super Bowl caliber starter. O'Connell has proven he can take reclamation projects and turn them into diamonds. He's got the system, the weapons, and the track record to make Jones look like the quarterback the Patriots thought they were getting when they drafted him in the first round. Jones managed to completely revive his career in San Francisco, stepping in when Brock Purdy went down and proving he still has legitimate NFL talent. That performance is going to draw significant interest from teams across the league who are desperate for quarterback stability. But here's the complication that could throw a wrench into the entire plan. 49ers head coach Kyle Shanahan made a statement that should send chills down the spine of every Vikings fan hoping to land Jones. Shanahan said, and I quote, "We're not into getting rid of good players. I'd be surprised if he's not here next year." Now you've got to ask yourself whether that's genuine desire to keep Jones as insurance behind Purdy, or whether it's masterful posturing designed to drive up the trade price. Shanahan is one of the sharpest minds in football, and he knows exactly how to play the game when it comes to trade negotiations. If multiple teams start bidding against each other for Jones, the price goes up, and Sullivan believes Jones could fetch a third-round pick, which is significantly more valuable than the measly 6th-rounder Jacksonville gave up when they traded for him. At that price point, the 49ers would be absolutely crazy to pass up the opportunity. Think about it from their perspective. They acquired Jones for almost nothing. He performed admirably when called upon, and now they could flip him for a legitimate draft asset while still having Purdy as their franchise quarterback. That's the kind of roster management that keeps teams competitive year after year. But the Vikings aren't the only team circling like sharks in the water. The competition for Mac Jones is absolutely fierce. CBS also lists the New York Jets and Miami Dolphins as potential landing spots, which means Minnesota could find themselves in a bidding war. The Steelers might actually offer Jones the clearest path to starting, considering their quarterback room consists of Mason Rudolph and Will Howard, neither of whom inspires confidence as a legitimate franchise quarterback. But here's what the Vikings can offer that Pittsburgh absolutely cannot: better weapons and Kevin O'Connell. Minnesota's offense is absolutely loaded with talent. Justin Jefferson is arguably the best wide receiver in football. Jordan Addison has shown he can be a legitimate number 2 threat. TJ Hawkinson provides a security blanket at tight end when healthy. Aaron Jones gives you a dynamic running back who can catch passes out of the backfield and make defenders miss in space. The offensive infrastructure in Minnesota is light years ahead of what Pittsburgh can offer, and that matters tremendously when a quarterback is choosing where he wants to resurrect his career. Plus, and this is the kicker, J.J. McCarthy isn't fully cemented as the starter either. The Vikings haven't made any declarative statements about McCarthy being untouchable or guaranteed the starting job for 2026. That means if Mac Jones comes in and absolutely lights it up during training camp in the preseason, there's a legitimate competition for the starting quarterback position. For a guy like Jones who's desperate to prove he deserves to be a starting quarterback in this league, that opportunity has to be incredibly attractive. So the question becomes, is Mac Jones the answer the Vikings have been searching for, or is he just another expensive mistake in a long line of questionable quarterback decisions? A third-round pick might not sound like much compared to the first and second rounders teams typically surrender for quarterbacks, but it's still a valuable draft asset that could be used to address other roster needs. The Vikings have to weigh whether the proven veteran presence of Jones is worth more than the unknown potential of whatever player they might draft in the third round. Here's my take, and you can disagree with me in the comments if you want. Trading a third-round pick for a 27-year-old quarterback with a $3 million cap hit is actually one of the safest moves the Vikings could make this offseason. The financial risk is minimal, the draft capital investment is reasonable, and the upside potential, especially under Kevin O'Connell's coaching, is enormous. If Jones comes in and performs even at 80% of what Sam Darnold just did, the Vikings are playoff contenders. If he exceeds expectations, they could be Super Bowl contenders. But while the front office debates the Mac Jones trade scenario, there's an even bigger story that's been unfolding behind the scenes. A power struggle that's been brewing for months, maybe even years, just reached its conclusion, and Kevin O'Connell has emerged as the undisputed winner. But with that victory comes crushing pressure that could either cement his legacy as an elite head coach or expose him as someone who talks a good game but can't deliver when championships are on the line. Adam Schefter broke the news on the Pat McAfee show, and his exact words should make every Vikings fan understand the magnitude of what just happened. A transfer of some power from the front office to the coaching staff has taken place over the season. That's not PR spin or corporate doublespeak. That's Schefter, one of the most connected insiders in football, telling you flat out that Kevin O'Connell just won a power struggle against general manager Kwesi Adofo-Mensah. Here's what makes this absolutely nuclear. Adofo-Mensah and O'Connell came to Minnesota together in 2022, hired within months of each other as part of a new regime that was supposed to bring fresh thinking and innovative approaches to a franchise that had been spinning its wheels for decades. On the surface, everything seemed aligned. They spoke the same language about building through the draft, being smart in free agency, and creating a sustainable model for long-term success. But in hindsight, that alignment was nothing but a facade, a carefully constructed public image that masked fundamental disagreements about how to build a championship roster. The Vikings announced that Rob Brzezinski would lead the front office through April's draft, which is just weeks away at this point. Then, and only then, would the organization seek a permanent replacement for Adofo-Mensah. But here's the detail that makes this absolutely brutal. Adofo-Mensah had been in Mobile at the Senior Bowl all week, apparently operating under the belief that his job was safe. Can you imagine? The man was scouting college prospects, evaluating talent, doing all the things a general manager does at the Senior Bowl, and the entire time ownership had already decided to fire him. He was essentially scouting prospects for a draft he would never oversee, making contacts and building relationships that would benefit whoever replaces him. Multiple reports indicate there was serious tension and discord in the Vikings building throughout the entire 2025 season, and the root cause appears to be decisions surrounding the quarterback room. This is where things get really interesting and where Kevin O'Connell's fingerprints are all over the situation. Super Bowl-bound Sam Darnold was allowed to leave in free agency. Daniel Jones, who the Vikings signed as a potential backup option, was also allowed to walk. The plan behind J.J. McCarthy, if there even was a coherent plan, was not well thought out or possibly not aligned between the coaching staff and front office. Diana Rossini from The Athletic reported that O'Connell had significant influence over these quarterback decisions, which means he bears responsibility for the current state of the position. Minnesota's ownership met multiple times, holding extensive conversations with various leaders, including Kevin O'Connell. After those discussions, after hearing all perspectives and evaluating all the information, they decided to fire their general manager despite the fact that Adolfo Mensa had recently signed a contract extension. Think about that. The man signed a new deal, presumably with assurances about his future with the organization, and then got axed anyway because ownership lost confidence in his vision. That's Kevin O'Connell having direct input into eliminating the man he supposedly worked alongside, the man who was theoretically his partner in building this roster. Vikings ownership made a choice. They picked their fighter in the power struggle, and that fighter was the head coach, not the general manager. In most NFL organizations, that's an unusual dynamic. Typically, the general manager holds more organizational power because he controls the roster, the salary cap, and the draft picks. But Minnesota flipped that script, giving O'Connell the influence and authority while pushing Adolfo Mensa toward the exit. But here's the crushing reality that should terrify Vikings fans who think this power consolidation is automatically a good thing. In 4 seasons as head coach, Kevin O'Connell has compiled a record of 43 wins and 25 losses. That's a winning percentage that looks great in the regular season. He's made the playoffs twice in those 4 years, which demonstrates consistency and the ability to get the team to the postseason. But here's the number that absolutely cannot be ignored. 0 postseason wins. That's right, 0, not 1. Not a single playoff victory despite having Justin Jefferson, one of the most talented receivers in NFL history. Despite having an offensive system that's supposed to be innovative and quarterback-friendly. Despite having defensive talent and resources invested on that side of the ball, Kevin O'Connell has yet to win a playoff game, and now he's likely to have prominent input into who replaces Adolfo Mensa and significantly more say over personnel decisions moving forward. With Adolfo Mensa gone, and the internal tension presumably resolved, the heat has been cranked up to maximum on Kevin O'Connell. If current trends continue and the schedule breaks favorably, the Vikings will probably win double-digit games again and make the playoffs. But that might be the absolute minimum expectation for year 5. O'Connell helped shape Adolfo Mensa into the fall guy, the scapegoat who takes the blame for the quarterback room dysfunction and draft failures. But if playoff wins don't come in 2026, if the Vikings make the postseason and get bounced in the first round again, then O'Connell becomes the obvious problem, and the Vikings could be searching for a new head coach in 2027. That's the double-edged sword of winning a power struggle. You get the authority and influence you wanted, but you also inherit all the accountability and pressure. There are no more excuses about the general manager making bad personnel decisions. There's no more deflecting blame to the front office for roster construction failures. Kevin O'Connell is now the man, and if this franchise doesn't start winning playoff games, he'll be the one shown the door. But while the power struggle played out behind closed doors, ownership decided to step into the spotlight and address the situation publicly. Mark Wilf, the Vikings owner, held a virtual press conference that lasted more than 17 minutes. And what he said during that session reveals the real reasons behind parting ways with Adolfo Mensa. The official statement was exactly what you'd expect. Corporate, measured, carefully worded to avoid legal complications. Following our annual end-of-season organizational meetings over the last several weeks, and after careful consideration, we have decided it is in the best interest of the team to move forward with new leadership of our football operations. But then Wilf said something that completely changes the narrative and helps you understand this wasn't a snap judgment or an emotional reaction to one disappointing season. He said, "It's not about any one decision or move. We looked at the situation cumulatively. We just didn't feel confident going through the entire heart of the offseason, an additional draft and free agency with this structure." That's ownership admitting they evaluated the entire 4-year tenure, looked at the cumulative results across drafts and free agency and roster construction, and ultimately lost confidence in the vision. This wasn't about Sam Darnold leaving and then making a Super Bowl run with a different team, though that certainly didn't help. This wasn't about one bad draft class or one questionable free agent signing. This was about a pattern of decisions that, when examined holistically, didn't inspire confidence about the future. Wilf went out of his way to explain that the timeline was part of the organization's commitment to avoiding knee-jerk reactions. He said, "We want to be pragmatic, thoughtful, methodical in making these decisions. We held our end-of-season meetings over a couple of weeks, then spent this past week reviewing, discussing, and deciding how best to move forward." That's ownership trying to demonstrate they didn't fire Adolfo Mensa in a fit of rage after a playoff loss or because of one specific failure. They took their time, examined all the evidence, and made what they believe is the best decision for the franchise's long-term success. The interim plan centers on Rob Brzezinski, who will serve as the point person on all football operations through the draft. The personnel department will lead decisions toward roster building with significant input from coaches, which really means Kevin O'Connell will have substantial influence over every major decision. Brzezinski brings legitimate credibility to this role. His tenure with the organization began in 1999, which means he just completed his 33rd NFL season and his 27th with the Vikings specifically. He's known across the league for salary cap expertise and contract negotiations, the kind of detailed financial work that keeps teams competitive while managing the constraints of the salary cap. But here's the brutal reality that Wilf's comments expose. When asked specifically about Adolfo Mensa's atypical background, coming from Wall Street rather than traditional football operations, Wilf's response was absolutely ice cold. He said, "Kwesi is a forward thinker. Great respect for him and his family. It's a difficult day. But going forward, it was really about a fit situation and the best path going forward." That, my friends, is corporate speak for, we made a mistake hiring someone without traditional football experience. The Vikings took a chance on bringing in someone with an analytics background, someone who thought differently about roster construction and player evaluation, and after 4 years, ownership has concluded that experiment failed. They're not saying Adolfo Mensa is a bad person or lacks intelligence or didn't work hard. They're saying the fit wasn't right, which is the polite way of acknowledging they hired the wrong person for the job. Although the media and many fans focus obsessively on the unique quarterback situation during the 2025 offseason, which resulted in both Sam Darnold and Daniel Jones leaving before J.J. McCarthy's first season, Wilf emphasized that ownership conducted a deep dive examination of the past several years. They didn't just look at one offseason or one position group, they evaluated everything. And when you dig into the details, the picture gets really ugly really fast. Free agency additions yielded some credit. The Vikings made some solid moves, bringing in veteran players who contributed to winning seasons. But draft results drew serious criticism, and this is where Adolfo Mensa's tenure looks absolutely disastrous. Of the 10 players selected in the 2022 draft, his first draft as general manager, only 2 remained on the roster through 2025. That's an 80% failure rate for a draft class, which is completely unacceptable at the NFL level. Your draft picks are supposed to be the foundation of your roster, the young, cost-controlled talent that allows you to be competitive while managing the salary cap. When 8 out of 10 picks don't pan out, you're essentially lighting draft capital on fire. That's the cumulative failure Mark Wilf was talking about. One bad draft, you can survive. Every general manager whiffs on picks occasionally. But when the pattern repeats across multiple drafts, when free agency can't compensate for the lack of young talent development, when the quarterback position becomes a revolving door of questionable decisions, ownership loses faith in the process and the person executing it. So now the Vikings find themselves at an absolute crossroads. They've got 3 massive storylines converging simultaneously, and how they handle the next several weeks will determine whether this franchise ascends toward championship contention or collapses into another rebuild. First, the Mac Jones trade rumors reveal that Minnesota is desperate to fix the quarterback room with a low-cost veteran who has legitimate upside. If Kevin O'Connell can work the same magic with Jones that he did with Sam Darnold, the Vikings could have a starting-caliber quarterback for $3 million while J.J. McCarthy continues developing. Second, the power struggle exposed that O'Connell won the internal war against Adolfo Mensa, but he's now saddled with 0 playoff wins in 4 seasons and all the pressure that comes with being the undisputed decision-maker. There are no scapegoats left, no general manager to blame for roster construction, no excuses about not having the right players. O'Connell has the keys to the franchise, and he better start winning playoff games or his seat will get scorching hot. Third, Mark Wilf's 17-minute press conference confirmed this wasn't about one decision or one disappointing result. This was about 4 years of cumulative failures that ownership methodically reviewed before making the decision to move on from Adolfo Mensa. The analytics experiment is over. The Vikings are heading back toward traditional football operations with someone who has conventional experience building NFL rosters. The NFC North implications of all this are absolutely massive. If the Vikings successfully trade for Mac Jones and he provides competent backup play while McCarthy develops behind him, they remain competitive in what might be the toughest division in football. Green Bay's window stays open, but their roster is aging, especially on defense, and they need Aaron Rodgers' successor to develop quickly. Detroit's dominance continues for now, but their salary cap situation is a ticking time bomb, with massive contracts coming due for key players. Chicago's rebuild is still probably 2 years away from legitimate contention, giving them time to develop Caleb Williams and build the roster around him. Minnesota wins the division if several things break right. Kevin O'Connell has to finally get that elusive first playoff victory. Rob Brzezinski has to navigate the draft successfully, hitting on key picks that provide immediate impact. The defense has to stay elite under coordinator Brian Flores, who's done an incredible job maximizing the talent on that side of the ball. But if the Vikings overpay for Mac Jones, if they fumble the general manager search after the draft, If McCarthy regresses instead of developing, then the North runs through Ford Field for the foreseeable future. The talent is absolutely there. The weapons are there. Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, TJ Hawkinson, Aaron Jones. That's a core of offensive playmakers that can compete with anybody. The defense has pieces. Young players with upside mixed with savvy veterans who know how to win. The infrastructure is in place with a stadium, ownership willing to spend, and a passionate fan base that deserves better than moral victories and regular season success. The question that will define the next era of Vikings football is whether Kevin O'Connell has the vision, the adaptability, and the game management skills to win when it matters most. Regular season victories are great. They get you to the playoffs and generate excitement. But championship legacies are built in January and February when the competition is fiercest and the margins for error disappear completely. Here's what's happening right now, at this very moment, that should have every Vikings fan on the edge of their seat. One trade offer is apparently pending. The 49ers are actively fielding calls for Mac Jones, and insiders say the Steelers have offered a fourth-round pick. But if Kevin O'Connell pushes ownership, if he makes the case that Jones is the missing piece for the quarterback room, the Vikings could outbid Pittsburgh with a third-rounder this weekend. That decision shapes the entire trajectory of the 2026 season before free agency even begins. And there's a fascinating rumor circulating that Rob Brzezinski might not just be a placeholder keeping the seat warm until the Vikings hire a permanent general manager. Sources suggest he could be a serious internal candidate if he absolutely nails the draft in April. If Brzezinski comes in, makes smart selections that provide immediate value, manages the salary cap brilliantly, and demonstrates he can handle the full scope of general manager responsibilities, ownership might decide they already have their guy. If that happens, O'Connell would have the ultimate alliance. A general manager who's been with the organization for nearly 3 decades and understands the culture, working in partnership with a head coach who's been empowered with significant personnel influence. Plus, ownership is apparently meeting with 3 external general manager candidates next week, and all of them have traditional football backgrounds. That tells you everything you need to know about the direction the Vikings are heading. The analytics era in Minnesota, the experiment with bringing in someone from outside conventional football operations, is definitively over. The next general manager will be someone who's paid their dues in scouting departments, worked their way up through traditional front office roles, and understands roster construction through the lens of football experience rather than data models and algorithmic projections. The war for the NFC North is absolutely here, and the Vikings are locked in a battle that will determine the next 5 years of this franchise. The talent exists to compete for championships. The infrastructure is in place to support a winning organization. The passionate fan base is ready to rally behind a team that finally breaks through and delivers playoff victories. But potential means nothing without execution, and execution has been the Vikings' Achilles heel for far too long. This is the moment where everything changes or everything stays frustratingly the same. Kevin O'Connell either proves he's an elite head coach who can win big games, or he joins the long list of Minnesota coaches who talked a good game but couldn't deliver championships. The front office either nails the general manager hire and the draft, setting up sustainable success, or they fumble the transition and waste another year of Justin Jefferson's prime. So here's what I need from every single person watching this. If you believe the Vikings just handed Kevin O'Connell the keys to the entire franchise, and he absolutely must prove he deserves that trust by winning playoff games, smash that like button right now. Show me you understand the stakes. Show me you're ready to hold this coaching staff and front office accountable for results, not just regular season victories. Drop a comment with your boldest prediction about this offseason. Should the Vikings trade for Mac Jones and try to develop him alongside J.J. McCarthy? Should McCarthy be thrown into competition for the starting job, forced to earn it rather than having it handed to him? Should Minnesota go all in on a veteran free agent quarterback who's proven he can win playoff games? I want to hear your takes, your arguments, your passionate defenses of whatever direction you think gives this team the best chance to win.